Okay, again, one more welcome to everyone. It's looking like we have just a really huge, awesome mix of our members, active volunteers, and our supporters here this evening. Um, by way of introduction, my name is Hallie. I've been at Represent Us for 4 years. I'm the manager of membership engagement, which means I just get to talk to people, our members and supporters like all of you all day, and make sure you're feeling appreciated and informed. I came to the movement out of frustration. I honestly hate politics so much that I had started to tune everything out until I learned about Represent Us. And seeing the solution video really truly gave me hope for the first time in years. And our efforts continue to keep me hopeful that our government will one day truly be of, by, and for the people, i.e. us, which is truly exciting. So again, as I'm just going to keep saying exciting, I'm just very excited to be here tonight to be as your moderator. We're going to talk about what 2020 looks like for Represent Us members, the anti-corruption movement as a whole, and all the different ways that you can be involved. So we're going to start with some brief introductions. Words are very hard, so thank you for bearing with me. And then we're going to talk about the momentum and the anti-corruption victories in 2019. Then we're going to dive into our strategy to make 2020 this movement's biggest year yet, of course. I'm joined, it's not just going to be me talking, I promise. I'm joined by three incredible people. First, we have Represent Us co-founder and managing director, Joshua Graham Lynn, who will be talking about our strategy to win more impactful anti-corruption campaigns than ever before. No pressure, as well as answering some of the questions you all submitted prior to this call. Then we're going to hear from Represent Us's national organizing manager, James Jameson, and national organizer, Helen Humphreys, who will fill you in on our plan to bring the power of this entire movement together by focusing on one effort at a time. Helen, James, and I will stick around after at the end to answer any lingering questions if we have time. Please feel free to post your questions as we go. We might not get to them, but we will make sure that you have an answer at some point this week. You can also feel free to email us after the call at grassroots@represent.us. So feel free to take notes, but don't worry, we're recording the call and we'll send you a follow-up email tomorrow or the day after, worst case scenario. Hopefully tomorrow. Without further ado, our co-founder and managing director, Joshua Graham Lynn. Take it away, Josh. Josh, you are muted.
Yep, sorry about that, everybody. Not only was I muted, but I also didn't put up the agenda screen for you all to read while Hallie was going through it. So here it is. You can take a quick second to look at it while I introduce myself. My name is Joshua Graham Lynn. I'm the co-founder of Represent Us. And it is always such a pleasure to do these calls because to see, I don't even know what the total count is up to, but watching that number rocket up while everybody gets on the phone just fills me with pride. We're well over 100, which is amazing. And frankly, it makes me feel so good to know that there are enough people out there who feel the same way we do, which is that this is the fight of our lives. This is the fight of our generation. And if we don't take up this mantle, if we don't sort of make the responsibility ours to make sure that the government works better, then it's not going to be better for the next generations. Which kind of brings me to why I'm doing this work, which I wanted to share with you briefly. First of all, I want to say, I think my mom is on the call tonight, which is really sweet. And so, hi, Mom. Always wanted to do that. And it sort of tied into why I do this work, which is that I myself have two little kids. I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old daughter. And when I think about the country and the world that I want them to live in, it's hard to imagine things getting better with the current state of affairs the way they are. And I felt that way for most of my life, at least since I was in my 20s. I'm now 41. I've sort of felt like things were stuck and there's a little bit of progress here and a little bit of progress there, but the things that we all agree as humans need to get better, that we need to take better care of each other, that we need to care for the less fortunate, that we need to have clean air and water for ourselves and healthy food and strong communities and good education. All of these things I suddenly realized were tied into the functioning of our government. And whether you're the kind of person on this call who believes that it's all of the money flowing into the system that makes our government unable to work, or whether you're the kind of person that believes gridlock and dysfunction and tribalism in Congress is the thing that makes it unable to work. The bottom line is that we all recognize that we're stuck. And if we're stuck, we can't do better for the next generations. And so to me, there's this really important challenge in the work that we do, which comes from being right-left and working with conservatives and progressives together, because I know for sure that the things I just talked about are things that everybody on this call will agree with. And everybody you meet anywhere in your life will agree with this. And it seems to me that America has forgotten how to have these conversations. We've forgotten how to disagree respectfully. We've forgotten how to work together even though we disagree. And we've, in many ways, forgotten how to fight for a common future and bringing along people with us rather than pushing aside those who we disagree with. And I think Represent Us and the broader movement to fix the system, and frankly, the broader movement to work across party lines, has a real power in that. Because if we as a society learn how to do those things again, then I think we can begin to make our country and the world work better again. And so that's what's in it for me. I invite you all, if you haven't, please do share what's in it for you, why you do this work in the chat box. I think it's awesome for us all, not to just see each other's stories and hear them, but I find it really empowering to know my own story and to be able to talk about it. It's great at dinner parties. It's great if you meet somebody you disagree with, to sort of have practiced what you want to say. And so I strongly encourage you to try that out, and what a great place to do it right now. Plus I know that Hallie will read them and get back to you and love using them. So please make her day. I figured I would start us off with just a little background on where we came from, what we're doing, and really it's rooted in this state-by-state strategy to pass anti-corruption reforms. I think if you're on this call, you probably already know we're striving to pass laws that are modeled on the American Anti-Corruption Act, which is model legislation that looks at how politicians are running for office, where their money comes from, the ethics, the transparency that goes into writing laws, and of course, how they govern, who are they responding to once they govern, how we vote for them. This is all stuff that's included inside the American Anti-Corruption Act, making those systems work better. And when we pull the American Anti-Corruption Act, with everything inside of it, we find that it's incredibly popular across party lines, but we all know that Congress is broken and Congress is stuck. And Congress can't even pass basic laws, never mind laws that fix the whole system that got Congress elected. And so we're pursuing this state-by-state strategy to pass anti-corruption laws all across the country en route to federal reform. This screen that you're looking at right now is from a video that we made that's with Jennifer Lawrence. And what she's explaining right here is that for interracial marriage, for marriage equality, women's suffrage, even prohibition era laws, these were all passed going state by state because Congress was intractable. And so what we believe is that we can follow in the footsteps of these other movements that have done so well working in the state-by-state strategy. And again, the idea is pretty simple. You take the model American Anti-Corruption Act, you pass a whole bunch of laws in cities and states that reflect that law, you build momentum and power to go all the way to Washington, D.C. And then the little trick is, every time we pass an election law in a state, that law actually affects the federal election in that state because states run elections. And so it's a two-pronged strategy. On one hand, we're actually fixing things right now in the states through the states. And on the other hand, we're building power and cleaning things up along the way for federal reform. And so this call is supposed to be about where we're going for 2020, and I'm really excited to get to it. But I think in order to understand where we're going, we have to start way back in 2014. And the reason I bring this up is because it's when Represent Us was able to pass the first of these anti-corruption acts. It was a city law in the city of Tallahassee. And for me, 2020 is all about the impact that our work can have. It's one thing to pass a law. It's a whole other thing to look at what actually happens when you do it. And I think one of the things that can be challenging about the work that we do is there is no instant gratification. You pass a law one cycle and then it gets used in the next cycle, and then maybe 2 or 3 years later you start to look at the results because all of the politicos start digging into the data of how those elections went, how things got better, or how they didn't get better. And so way back in 2014, Tallahassee, Florida, the impact of that law was this. Shortly after the law was passed, there was a federal corruption probe in Tallahassee, and the entire council of chairs flipped over. It was a clean sweep of the Tallahassee government in response to the passage of tough anti-corruption laws. And that kind of movement is the kind of impact we can have when we pass these laws. Another great example, a year or two later, was Seattle, where they passed this voucher-funded public funding. They called it democracy vouchers. And what you're seeing here, I think, is really cool. On the left is cash donors for the mayoral race. This is people who are making cash donations. And on the right, you see the voucher donations. What's important about this is imagine if it was only cash donations. You can see there's a small concentration in the middle of the city. That's downtown, where all the people who can afford downtown apartments live and can afford to make political donations. When you introduce vouchers, you see that all of a sudden you've democratized the process of running for office, because now it's all over the city and many, many more people are empowered to participate. In fact, so many more. Check out this chart. In 2013, you had about half large donors and half small donors. In 2017, after this law was put into place, 87% of the donations to the mayoral race, to the city council and city attorney races came from small donors. And so it's this impact that I want you to continue thinking about as we fast forward all the way up to 2018. And the reason I skipped to 2018 is because it was an incredible year full of promise, but we haven't yet seen the impact of it. If you've been following Represent Us for any amount of time, you know we really celebrated 2018. We celebrated people like Katie Fahey, who led the campaign in Michigan. And I think a lot of people have heard her story. It's become pretty famous that she put up a Facebook post saying, quote, "I'd like to take on gerrymandering in Michigan. If you're interested in doing this as well, please let me know." This is the actual screenshot of the actual Facebook post that kicked off a campaign in Michigan that knocked on something like 400,000 doors across the state. This was conservatives, progressives together. They knew that it had to get done, and they did it. Here's another great example. The so-called badass grandmas from North Dakota, the two in the middle, Ellen and Dina, that's a Democrat and a Republican who were so inspired seeing the work that happened around the country that they wanted to pass ethics and transparency laws in North Dakota. And then the other thing that's so important is the work that we all do. That's everybody on this call, every Represent Us member. It's things like texts into states, it's things like making phone calls, and it's things like supporting local actions. Because when we put together the power of all of us, we have so much potential and so much power. And so here's a photo from Michigan where the Chamber of Commerce had opened up a lawsuit to get this law off the ballot before it even had a chance to get voted on. Represent Us members rushed in. We started a huge campaign. These were the people on the ground. The people from all over the country flooded inboxes, sent faxes and texts, and you name it, into Michigan. We put up newspaper ads. We all worked together as one unit to make sure that Michigan can win. And it did. It stayed on the ballot and eventually won. And this was all part of, as I mentioned before, the 2018 run of victories, which was the most wins for anti-corruption and pro-democracy in the history of the United States of America, which is really something. The most wins in history. It was 23 victories. And here's by far the best part. This is Katie on election night. Here's the badass grandmas on election night. And we want more people all over this country to have that feeling. I want you and I want me to be feeling that every single cycle, that we all work together and we're all part of these victories and we all win. It's all part of this idea that this rush of state activity will ultimately lead to a change in federal law. So that's where we came from. Where are we going? 2019 was all about having more Katies and making sure those Katies win. Okay? More grandmas, more Katies, we want them to win. And 2020 is going to look pretty similar to that. In 2019, we launched what we call the Campaign Connector and the Campaign Accelerator. Fancy words for very simple ideas. I want to start with the connector. The connector is where all of us come in. It is the idea that we are a movement that's built all over this country. And what Represent Us can do for you is connect you to the campaigns that need your help. This slide looks familiar because I showed it before. Texts, phone calls, local actions. We want you to be involved in helping these campaigns win. And so over the course of 2019, we built this program to connect people to campaigns to help those campaigns win. So that's the connector. And then here's the accelerator. The idea with the accelerator is that there are something like 200 campaigns popping up all over the country for the coming cycle, which is way too many for us to manage, and it's way too many to win all at once. And so what our team internally is doing is prioritizing those campaigns based on policy impact and political viability. And we take the ones that have the most potential to win and have the biggest impact, and we all get behind them. We use our internal resources and our smarts, like the organizing team that you see here, and we help professionalize those campaigns. We tell them what we've learned over all these years of movement building together so that we can all use that together to win. So again, impact, viability in the center. It leads us to things like the huge win in New York City for ranked choice voting in 2019. This tripled the number of Americans who were using ranked choice voting in this country. One other thing I want to let you know we did in 2019 was this incredible walk. I say we, but it was mostly this guy, Ronaldo Pearson, leading the charge. He walked 700 miles from Atlanta to DC to speak up for voting rights and to speak against corruption. He's making the case for all of us to recognize that if people don't have the right to vote equally, that in itself is corrupt. And what happens is that the establishment and the big money players, they use the power that they have to control our votes to build themselves more power. And so what you end up having is a vicious cycle where money breeds bad behavior, breeds cheating in elections, breeds more money, breeds more power, et cetera. And so we're here to say enough of that. All right, 2020, the reason we're here, I think this is incredibly exciting. This is the map we're working with for 2020. And I want you to know this is one of the first years that RepresentUs has really been able to look at the broadest view of the movement and identify where there's the biggest potential to win. And so while we had 23 victories in 2018 and a handful in 2019, an off year election-wise, you can see here that we're looking at a massive reform map. You've got a couple recent victories already on here, like Maine and New York City. But I want to draw your attention to places like Alaska, where you see lots of colors going through it. This map is available, by the way, at represent.us/map. Did I get that right, team? Yeah. Simple URL, represent.us/map. It will be updated. It will change. So don't get totally married to it, but this is the lay of the land as we look right now. And the reason I'm calling out Alaska is because in 2018, Alaska passed big anti-corruption reforms, sort of like half of the American Anti-Corruption Act. Here they are again, going into 2020 with a whole new slate of reforms. And this is exemplary for what we want to see happen across the country. We want to see not just one reform pass, but we want to see it build state by state by state. And you can see that we're starting to get more colors in different places around the country. You've got ranked choice voting being pursued in Colorado, Georgia, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Tennessee, and so on. Things like vote by mail and vote from home and automatic voter registration happening around the country. This is obvious stuff. It just means that you get a ballot mailed to your house and you can either mail it back in or drop it off at a polling place. It increases voter participation. And if you're automatically registered to vote, instead of having to opt in to vote, you just have to opt out if you don't want to vote. It means we've got more people participating in the process, again, democratizing our elections. So please be sure to check out this map. I'm not going to go through all of it right now because it would take forever. There's a ton on here, but just to sort of guide you through it, it's a broad mix of anti-gerrymandering, vote by mail, ranked choice voting, open primaries, money in politics, automatic voter registration, and more. There's even more going on in the country than you can see here, but these are the places that we see right now with the biggest potential for the impact viability Venn diagram. And so what James and Helen are going to take you through a little later is going to be how we as a movement can focus on some of these campaigns and help them out when they need our help the most. So stick around to get your action steps. We're going to do a quick Q&A now, and then we'll come back around later.
Thank you so much, Josh, for, as one person put it, inspiring look back at what has led us up to now 2020. And thank you also to everyone else on the call for submitting your incredible questions. We received a record number of questions. So obviously we're not going to get to every single one unless you guys want to be on here till midnight Eastern. So anyway, we have people from other coasts here. So I'm going to go into the questions that we have. First, we have one from Susan in New Jersey. 2020 is a big year, and many people are either focusing their attention on candidates or wanting to know where they can spend their time making the biggest impact. How can I make the case to my friends for getting involved with RepresentUs?
That is a great question. So here's the thing, you guys. I would never make the case to anybody that you should not get behind the candidate that you want to support. It is so important to get out there and fight for whichever candidate it is that you believe represents your values the best. But what I would ask of anybody, and I say this to people all the time, is, are you satisfied with the way that things have changed or progressed in the last decade, 2 decades? Or do you see that there's a repeat problem here where, regardless of who we vote in, not regardless, but we're not getting everything that we want. Things aren't moving fast enough. And if they are moving fast enough for you, then by all means, put all of your attention on the upcoming election. But if you're like us and you believe that there's actually something systemic standing in the way of real change, then it's time to fight for this also. I like to say you don't have to just believe only one thing. You can believe in a candidate, and you can also believe that the system is broken and needs to be fixed. And so that's generally what I ask people to do. Maybe you put in 50% of your time. Maybe you put 100% of your time because you're sick of all the candidates and the whole mess. I don't know what it is for you. But you definitely have to do something, because if you do nothing, then nothing ever changes. It's just the same thing. You get back on the hamster wheel and we go and go and go. So I would challenge you to challenge the people around you to take a longer view, the short version.
Thank you. Next, we actually received so many variations of this next question, but I'm going to give credit to Gary in Indiana, especially because I saw in the chat that he's on the call. Which presidential candidate is most likely to make real changes to reduce the influence of money in politics if elected?
So this is a tricky question, because as you will all know, there's a huge difference between many of the candidates. And a great way to learn about this is to look at our website. We have a scorecard up for all the candidates who are willing to respond. It's at represent.us/scorecard. And what you'll see there is that there's been a widespread effort by many groups in our space. I want to give a shout out to Larry Lessig, who's been a huge leader in this area, asking candidates to take a pledge to fix democracy first. And what that means is all the same things we're talking about in the Anti-Corruption Act: voting reforms, money in politics, ethics, gerrymandering, etc. And you'll see that there's a big difference in what candidates are proposing. However, my personal take is that I am sick of waiting for candidates to deal with this, because it feels to me like every time an election comes around, you've got a candidate saying, I'm going to be the anti-corruption candidate. And it's not getting done. I wish I could say that it was getting done. It's not getting done under Trump. It unfortunately didn't get done under Obama. It didn't get done before that or before that or before that. And so I'm starting to feel like Charlie Brown with the football, and Lucy is just yanking it out of the way every time. It's like at some point, it's hard to say that the presidential candidate is actually going to do what they say they're going to do. And so we're cheering for the ones who have taken the pledge. That's Republicans and Democrats together. Both sides have pledged to fix democracy first. And we're really hoping they'll stand by their word, and we're going to hold them accountable. And at the same time, RepresentUs' role and the role of this movement is to keep the drumbeat going in the states, because that's where all the energy is. That's where we're getting traction. And man, that is a powerful story that we're putting together. And so at some point we'll hit that tipping point and it'll have been worth it.
So well said. Thank you, Josh. All right, next we have David in Arizona asking, is RepresentUs currently assessing every voting municipality in the country for feasibility of passing each individual item in our AACA, which is the American Anti-Corruption Act, agenda, in order to determine prime target locations in which to focus efforts for each individual issue?
That sounds like a question from somebody who is ready to help with that project. If you're smart enough to ask that question, we should be having you help with that out. The short answer is we have limited resources, and so we are not assessing every single municipality. What we are doing is doing the very best job that we can, and I think the best job in the broader field of tracking every campaign that bubbles up, which means talking to the people in charge of that campaign, assessing the right-left efforts in that campaign, making sure that it's viable, and making sure that whatever the reforms are proposed are going to be impactful in that municipality. And so while I wish that we were able to assess the whole entire country in that way, I think it's going to be a bigger effort. And we believe that the best thing to do right now is to focus the limited resources that we do have on finding campaigns that have promise, that are going to make a really big difference, and that have that right-left leadership.
Thank you. And I do believe David is offering his services. We'll be in touch, David.
Thank you, David.
Antoinette in North Carolina is wondering, given the 10-year anniversary of Citizens United, which is coming up on January 21st, can you speak to where the nation stands on reversing it?
So just to provide context, Citizens United and partner Supreme Court rulings that passed around the same time, Speech Now and more, basically said that corporations have the unlimited right to make political donations, the shortest version. And unfortunately, what that did is it unleashed a massive flood of money into the political process, money that doesn't come from individuals, but actually comes directly from corporate entities, for better or for worse. however you feel about that is up to you. And the thing that I often like to say when people ask about Citizens United is, was everything okay 10 years ago? Like just before that, we were getting everything we wanted and then Citizens United was the only thing? Certainly it made things worse. But the reality is, while there are groups fighting to pass the constitutional amendment, they have a very long road ahead and we are cheering for them. And again, we really view Represent Us' role as staying in our lane. So the update that I have for you is, in order to pass that amendment, we would need to see 2/3 of Congress and 3/4 of the states get behind it. And right now, I think they're at about 20 states that have called for an amendment. They're doing a state-by-state process in that way. But these are just resolutions calling for the amendment. At some point, they might get to the number that they need. Like I said, we're at 20. We hope it goes ahead. It's not exactly our lane. And again, we really do believe that there's so much we can fix right now, including things like gerrymandering, providing ranked choice voting, giving people easier access to the ballot, just to secure and modernize our elections so that it works better for everybody. And if we do those things, the system will work a lot better. And then hopefully down the line, we'll also see Citizens United get fixed.
Thank you. All right, Randy from Rhode Island asked a question that we actually get a lot. As a fiscal conservative and a social moderate, I currently support the Republican agenda. Am I still welcome to participate and represent us?
Absolutely. Not only welcome, but required, right? I mean, it is a core tenet of the work that we do that this cannot be partisan, and we really do believe and stand behind that. So whether you're Republican or whether you're Democrat doesn't matter at all. I would really hope that everybody gets involved in this work. And I think what that comes down to is, what is it that's making you feel like the government's not working for you? I think it's pretty rare that you meet somebody that feels like the system is working really, really well. It shouldn't matter what side of the aisle they come from. We all can agree that things could be much, much better. And so to be able to put aside party politics, or we like to use the phrase internally that we want to be beyond partisanship, right? Like, the partisanship hasn't been working. It's gotten some things done. It's been good for one party, good for the other. But by and large, there's a lot of things that need to be fixed that can't happen when partisanship gets in the way. And so we get beyond that. And I think I said it before, but I want to underscore it. All of our state campaigns that have been successful have been because Republicans and Democrats have worked together. And it's just essential. It's the only way it works. It means that there's a lot less opposition. And it means that you get a lot of trust from the people of your state because they see that you're willing to set aside party differences and get things done.
Great. Randy, I hope you're on the call, and I hope that makes you feel better about being with Represent Us. Being conscious of time, Josh, just one last question for you.
Sure.
David in Colorado wants to know, how will it impact the lives of generations to come when we the people pass the Anti-Corruption Act?
What a great question. Gosh, I wish we could have a big group discussion about this because I would love to hear everybody. Since I've got the floor, I guess I will just say, I think it's easier to envision a country where the very best and brightest that we have run for office and have the chance to win. Where when politicians or elected officials are making decisions, their decision making is purely made for what's best for the most number of people, or what's right ethically, and it's not based on who has the biggest bank account or who they owe a favor to. I can envision a country where our children actually trust the government institutions around them, and they believe that what's being done is for their own benefit and the benefit of the people around them and the broader global community. I don't want to harp on it, but I think it's really sad that we don't have that trust. And I know when I think about my kids, I think about what a happier, healthier community they will live in if they believe that they are well represented and they believe that they have power and they have agency. And yeah, that's what I think is possible if we, not only if we pass these reforms, I want to be really clear about that. Passing the laws is one thing, but passing the laws and then protecting them and caring about it and building a movement where people actually give a damn that it's happening, that is so crucial to the work we do. And I meant to say it on the map earlier, but you'll see there's a couple on there where we're now defending things that won in 2018 because here comes the establishment trying to put things back the way it was. And so we have to be there, and we have to believe. And I believe that the act of doing this work makes you a better citizen, and it makes you a better American, because you're fighting for your country.
Josh, thank you so, so much. Really
Absolutely.
appreciate your time and your presentation. Now that we have all that background information, and as we transition into other presentations here, we have a status of kind of what the anti-corruption movement is at right now and our vision for 2020. We're going to talk about how we can put that vision into practice. So I'm going to hand it over to Represent Us organizing team to talk about how to take action with Represent Us in 2020 and the next big anti-corruption campaign. So James.
Fantastic. You guys hear me? Great. Well, first off, Josh, thank you so much for joining us and doing that Q&A. That was fantastic. So my name is James Jameson. I'm the National Organizing Manager. And so I want to talk a little bit about what is coming up and how best to get involved with Represent Us. And so the organizing team kind of want to pull back a little bit and talk about kind of our national strategy. Hey, this is a national strategy call, isn't it? So in 2019, and historically in odd years, our focus has really been on movement building, right? Getting just as many people in the door, bought in with the strategy of Represent Us, bought in with going state to state and passing anti-corruption laws and eventually winning at the federal level. On the odd years, it's that movement building, just getting people in the door, getting them involved and activated and passionate about this issue. And then on the even years, we get to do what I personally really enjoy, and that's winning. And so on even years like this year, because typically ballot initiatives are passed and fought in even years, with obvious some exceptions, that's where we, well, for lack of a better term, spend the capital that we have built over the course of the last year. And there really are three kind of big ways to get involved. And number one is the Action Brigade, and we'll talk a little bit about what that is. The second is organizing locally, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means, especially in a campaign year like this year. And then the third is getting involved with our national organizing communication hub. We use a program called Slack to stay in touch with each other and connect with each other, build best practices. So the first way that I want to talk about organizing with Represent Us is what's on here. It's the Action Brigade. Now, the Action Brigade is our national team of Represent Us volunteers who are helping to win anti-corruption victories for campaigns all across the country. And so, these are volunteers that are working together to support the most urgent anti-corruption campaigns wherever they are. As Joshua was saying earlier, our campaigns team is constantly evaluating anti-corruption campaigns, looking for efforts that are at the cross-section of policy impact and political viability. We identify the most effective ways that volunteers can support campaigns, even from thousands of miles away, and without even having to leave your couch. And so, the Action Brigade, these are the folks who are making a ton of phone calls, who are texting a ton of people. I like to describe this as, as needed, we can be the laser beam that is, activating volunteers and getting them plugged into an event, or we can be a sledgehammer where we are sending just a ton of texts, over 500,000 into New York City, for example. And so, the Action Brigade's open to anyone who wants to support the anti-corruption movement all across the country. You'll be able to directly support some of the most pressing anti-corruption campaigns and winning local and state victories that fuel the anti-corruption movement. And It's these victories that are absolutely essential. Whether or not it's your state that's kind of on the chopping block this year, we have to win in order to keep on going with the momentum. So 2018, we won more campaigns than we ever have across the country. 2020 promises to be an even bigger array of campaigns that are happening. That means we have to fight and win in more places. And it's not just about making sure that your state or your neighbors win. Every single time there's a campaign victory, that empowers and motivates the volunteers in your own state to get involved, in your own backyard. You live in West Virginia. Well, the best way to make things happen and organize locally in West Virginia is to help out with a campaign in Virginia. Now, that may have been foreshadowing for what's about to happen soon, but the Action Brigade is how you can get involved, help secure wins wherever you are in the country. Now, the second piece, organizing locally, kind of has two big facets to it. On one hand, and we're going to show that map again, if you live in a state or a city with an active campaign, well, I'm going to tell you, the best way to get involved is just to join that campaign. You live in Massachusetts, join the ranked choice voting campaign in Massachusetts. You live in San Diego, join the Democracy Vouchers campaign in San Diego. That is absolutely, hands down, the best way to get involved. Now, if you don't live in a place with an active campaign, that doesn't mean you can't organize locally. And in fact, it means you probably still should, for two big reasons. One is we need your help to win these campaigns across the country. And so whether you are organizing local phone banking parties, if you're organizing what I lovingly call a campaign a caravan, line of cars going in. If you live in West Virginia, get some buddies together and drive into Virginia, knock on doors for that campaign. That's going to be huge. And it's so important that we build this grassroots infrastructure all across the country so we can empower as many volunteers as humanly possible in preparation for future campaigns. And finally, I want to make a big plug, mostly because Helen would kill me if I didn't. If nothing else, I want you to join our Represent Us volunteer community. This is an online communications platform, essentially a cross between like a chat room and a forum. But we use a program called Slack. A lot of folks use it for like working, talking between coworkers. We have built a Slack workspace that is specifically for Represent Us volunteers and activists to get involved, get connected with each other. It's also where the Action Brigade lives. So if you do nothing else, join the Represent Us Slack. So I wanted to take a look real quick back at this map that that Josh showed earlier. Now, I want to flag that this by no means is either an exhaustive list of campaigns. In particular, this is a list of almost all statewide efforts, with one exception highlighting New York City, which passed last year. However, New York City has a ton of people, so basically counts. So this doesn't include municipal efforts like that vouchers campaign in San Diego. It also is not going to be the full list forever. There will be other campaigns that get added. And unfortunately, just based on how the world works, there will be campaigns that get dropped from this list. So this is definitely a living document. Again, to see our most up-to-date version, if you go to represent.us/map, you'll see this version. But as you can see, there's a ton of different campaigns. And one of the things that we're going to be doing this year in order to try and kind of parse this out is every 4, 6, sometimes 8 weeks, really depends on the campaign, we're going to be focusing on a single one of these campaigns, really trying to highlight the issue that's happening there and giving a really tangible and impactful way to get involved and way to help support that campaign and help secure a victory. Again, we need to win all over the place in order for this movement to be successful. And that means, you live in Iowa, well, then you should be helping to make calls for a campaign, say, in Virginia. You like that segue? Let's talk about Virginia, because right now there is a big fight against gerrymandering happening in that state. So, right now, politicians in Virginia pick their voters instead of the other way around. This is the classic case of gerrymandering, and Virginia is honestly one of the worst gerrymandered states in the country. It allows for self-serving politicians to ensure their reelection by making safe districts that were drawn or influenced by political appointees and leaders. Now, these politicians are trying to make it impossible for the voters to hold them accountable. But we have a chance to stop gerrymandering in Virginia. Politicians right now are considering a bill to end partisan gerrymandering and return power to the voters. It'll ensure that districts are drawn fairly. That way, neither party has a political advantage. And it forces politicians in both parties to be more accountable and more transparent to their constituents. Now, this is timely because right now is our last opportunity to stop gerrymandering before voting districts are redrawn next year in 2021. That means if we don't win now, we have to wait another 10 years to fix the corrupt status quo. I don't want to wait 10 years. So in order to pass it, we have to show politicians that voters are putting this issue front and center. Right now, in fact, on last Thursday, it's the start of the legislative session in Virginia. And so that means politicians have hundreds of issues on their desks to consider. And it's up to us to make sure that they move this bill forward, making it the center of attention for the anti-corruption movement. So what that means is that RepresentUs members across the country can help by spreading the word about this campaign and joining our Day of Action, National Day of Action on January 28th to contact voters in Virginia and patch them through to Virginia politicians. This way, we're going to put a ton of pressure on politicians. We'll get this issue, get anti-gerrymandering to be front and center and ensure that they actually pass anti-gerrymandering laws in time before new maps are drawn. Now, what specifically does that look like? How can you get involved? Well, for that, I'll hand it over to Helen, our national organizer.
Awesome. Can everyone hear me? We're good? All right. So thank you so much again for everyone who is on this call. I see a lot of familiar names on here. And so I just want to quickly say thank you so much for everyone who is spending their Monday night with us on a national strategy call. So for those who don't know me, my name is Helen Humphreys. I am the national organizer at RepresentUs headquarters. I've been with us for about 2.5 years now, and I have been so inspired from day one just watching all of these campaigns come to fruition. And I am really, really excited to be working with one of our longest standing chapters in Virginia for our Day of Action, which will be January 28th. So James gave you the full background on the Virginia campaign, and so now I'm going to give you the details, nitty-gritty of what can you do to get involved. So the first thing is I'm going to ask you where you are. Are you in Virginia? Are you someone who is a Virginia resident, a Virginia voter? You've got family in Virginia, you know people in Virginia that care about the fact that they want to be able to pick their politicians rather than the other way around. So January 28th, we will be working with the campaign on the ground to have a citizen lobby day in Richmond. So I'm going to encourage everyone who is in Virginia to check your schedule. January 28th, it's going to be from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. again in Richmond. And if you want to RSVP, all you have to do is go to represent.us/ and this is all lowercase, all one word, BA Lobby Day. And so that is what we would love for folks to do if you are on the ground, connect with our chapters there. We have some really amazing leaders there. Represent Roanoke Valley is actually someone who they were founded in 2014. We have an amazing leader there, David Denham, and we were actually co-founded by, for anyone who has come to our Unrig the System conferences, both Tessa and Angela Yarborough, who were a mother-daughter pair that was arrested together at Democracy Spring, were actually the co-founders of our Represent Roanoke Valley chapter in Virginia. And so we've got some really amazing history there. There's incredible activists on the ground, and if you want to connect with them and go to the Citizen Lobby Day, please sign up, again, represent.us/VA Lobby Day. And then this whole day of action, we're not only having people talk to legislators in person, but we're going to have them fill up their voicemails the same exact day. It is going to be awesome. So are you outside of Virginia? On January 28th, we are having a National Phone Bank Day where it doesn't matter if you are, again, in Iowa, if you're in Massachusetts, California, Alaska, we want you to join us for a phone bank day. And we're going to call all of our supporters in Virginia and ask them, will you contact your legislator about this anti-gerrymandering initiative? It is one of the most fun ways to phone bank. It's one of the most impactful things that we can do for this type of campaign. So not only will our members actually be there talking to their legislators, but they will also be simultaneously getting a bunch of voicemails from our members as well. And that will be thanks to you because you will be making calls and asking them to do so. So if you would like to join us for the phone bank, that is again going to be on January 28th. We will have continuous phone banks, but the one that I really want you to focus on is Tuesday, January 28th. It's going to be an all-day thing, and so represent.us/ again, no spaces, no capital, VA calls, so VACALLS. And again, we're going to send a follow-up email with all of this information, so please don't feel like you need to write all of these URLs down, but if you want to, they're here now. Another thing that I just really wanted to quickly plug is I know that someone mentioned in the chat box that Ben, our Action Brigade leader, makes phone banks really fun. And that made New York City really fun. And so he will actually be leading a phone banking training this Sunday. It'll happen each Sunday, but this Sunday from 4 p.m. Eastern to 5 p.m. Eastern time. Please join him, and we'll send the information out on the follow-up email as well for you to join. I swear, super fun. If you don't believe me, you can check the chat box. There's proof. All right, so just to quickly go through your next steps. Again, RSVP for our January 28th day of action. We've got the in-person Citizen Lobby Day. We've got the National Phone Banking Day that you can do from your own home. You can also put on a phone banking party if you want to get your friends together and we can set you up with our system. That's always a really great time. Get pizza, start calling people, super fun. And then at the end of the day, if there's one thing that I could get you to do, just one, it is to join Slack, our online communications channel, which James told you about as well. So if you just go to represent.us/chat, you can get connected and stay up to date with what we're doing with the campaign and how we're moving the needle forward in Virginia. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it back to Hallie, and thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, Helen. I don't know about everyone else on the call, but I am already fired up again. And as this slide demonstrates well, I am actually as manager of membership engagement in development, which means I'd be remiss if I didn't say, if you can't give your time and none of that Slack doesn't work for you, you don't want a phone bank, you don't want to go to lobby day in person, please consider giving your financial support. You can make a one-time donation of $20 for the first 20 campaigns of 2020, or you could give any amount to join the Commonwealth, which is our monthly giving program. Gifts through the Commonwealth go directly to support all the campaigns that are in that map and everything that we've talked about today, which is really exciting. I know a lot of you are also probably asking, all right, great. Like Helen just said, this is a lot of information. Where can I find all of that? Don't worry, we're gonna send you an email. We'll send you a recording with the recording of the call, as well as links to any of the resources we mentioned to the email address that you RSVP'd with. And now